For centuries, the Orion Accord ruled the galaxy with quiet confidence. It did not rely on strength alone, but on order. Borders were measured. Trade routes approved. Disputes logged, debated, delayed, and resolved by procedure. Wars were rare because they were inefficient. Stability was not an ideal. It was a system. Every species learned its place. Expansion required permission. Defense required justification. Predictability was rewarded. Uncertainty was corrected. The Accord believed this was control. On every official star chart, the Orion spiral was cleanly divided. Lanes glowed with traffic. Sectors were color-coded by authority. And near the inner edge, one region remained dark. Terran claimed space, no gates. No corridors. No transponders. Only a simple warning marker that had not changed in 300 years. Do not enter. Most dismissed it as ceremonial. An outdated claim by a minor species that never adapted. Some called it superstition, a relic of early interstellar fear. Others assumed humanity collapsed, withdrew, or failed. No embassies argued otherwise. No fleets challenged the narrative. Silence was interpreted as weakness. The Accord accepted that silence without concern. If humans did not participate, they were irrelevant. Systems that do not engage do not disrupt balance. The warning remained, not out of respect, but convenience. Occasionally, sensors detected fluctuations along the Terran border. Power spikes that vanished. Shadows where traffic should have been. Autonomous monitors logged the events and archived them as interference. Static, ghost readings. Nothing worth attention. When a handful of small trade convoys failed to arrive near the periphery, their losses were processed as routine risk. Shipping was dangerous. Routes adjusted. Insurance claims settled. No inquiry followed. No investigation crossed into dark space. The council chambers remained calm. Metrics were stable. Resource flows held. Influence maps remained unchanged. The galaxy appeared orderly because the Accord expected it to be. What the Accord did not understand was simple. Control had limits. And silence was not absence. That the stability they trusted rested on a lie so comfortable it went unchallenged. That all borders were negotiable. That all species sought inclusion. That no one would draw a line and enforce it alone. The galaxy had never tested Terran space. And when it finally did, the system would learn the difference between order and restraint. Humanity existed in the Accord's records as a footnote. A brief rise, a quiet retreat, then centuries of absence. In official archives, they were labeled non-participatory and strategically negligible. A species that failed its first test of galactic integration and chose isolation instead of adaptation. Academies taught it as a cautionary example. Humans encountered conflict early, lost assets, and withdrew. Weak cultures fold inward. Strong ones negotiate. That was the lesson repeated across lecture halls and command simulators. No one questioned it, because no one had seen evidence to the contrary. Their ships, when discussed at all, were described with mild disdain. Too heavy. Too simple. Too reliant on physical mass instead of elegant energy solutions. Analysts compared them to early industrial designs, assuming humanity never advanced past brute engineering. There were no patents, no trade samples, no demonstrations to contradict the assumption. As the Accord expanded, trade routes bent closer to Terran borders. Navigation buoys were placed just outside the warning line. Some captains cut corners through fringe sectors, joking about ghost space and human myths. Nothing happened. Silence reinforced arrogance. In council chambers, proposals circulated. Resource surveys of abandoned Terran systems. Protective oversight for a species presumed extinct or incapable. No objections were raised. You cannot offend a civilization that does not speak. When a light freighter vanished near the border, Enforcement flagged it and moved on. Pirates were common. Miners disappeared all the time. Dispatching assets would be wasteful. No one suggested looking inward. Toward the dark region, the charts still marked as claimed. The absence of human diplomats was cited repeatedly. No envoys meant no leverage. No treaties meant no standing. Influence, the Accord believed, only existed where voices were heard. Humanity had chosen silence, and silence meant irrelevance. Even the automated systems detected along the border supported the narrative. Old probes. Passive monitors. They did not challenge traffic or transmit warnings beyond the ancient marker. They observed and did nothing. To the Accord, this was proof of decay, not discipline. Confidence grew careless. The idea that humans might still enforce their claim became laughable. A frontier unguarded for 300 years was no frontier at all. So when an independent exploration vessel requested clearance to cross the boundary, the response was indifferent approval. No escort, no warning. Just coordinates and a reminder that nothing of value was expected inside. The crew prepared for empty systems and dead worlds. They did not. No, they were about to become the first test in centuries, and the first. Mistake. History would record the moment quietly. No alarms, no protests. Just a ship crossing a line that still mattered, whether the galaxy believed it or not. Very much so. The Cathari Insight crossed the Terran boundary without resistance. No alarms sounded. No interceptors appeared. Only empty space and silent stars greeted the vessel as it advanced deeper, sensors searching for ruins and profit. Hours later, something appeared. A drifting human barge, powerless, scarred, its hull patched with emergency plating. Its beacon pulsed weakly, repeating a civilian distress code that the Cathari recognized but ignored. Opportunity replaced caution. Boarding teams cut inside. They found no defenses. No soldiers. Only families strapped into failing cryopods. Life signs fading, air thin. Systems dying. Children. Elders. Civilians. The captain did not hesitate. Orders were given calmly. Bind them. Secure them. Mark them as cargo. Transport classification was entered into the log. The crew accepted it without argument. Human law did not apply here. Accord law did not recognize this space. Abandoned territory meant unclaimed lives. Some hesitated when medical displays activated automatically. Records scrolled across the barge's consoles. Evacuation origin. Stellar instability. Civilian relocation. These were refugees fleeing a disaster that had already consumed their home. Not combatants. Not assets. Just survivors. The logs were copied anyway. So was the flight recorder. Anything valuable was stripped. Supplies removed. The beacon was silenced. The barge was left drifting again, emptier than before. What the Cathari did not see was the relay awakening. Deep within Terran space, an automated node detected the distress code's abrupt termination. It traced the signal backward, matched foreign signatures, verified civilian presence. A protocol long dormant executed without delay, across light years. A single encrypted burst reached Earth. No council assembled. No votes were taken. No permissions requested. The data was reviewed once. That was enough. Within Terran Command, a line of text appeared on a tactical display. Simple, absolute. Civilians lost. Intruder identified. Response authorized. The message propagated through systems never meant to be seen. Drives warmed. Hulls powered. Timers began counting down. Elsewhere, the Cathari Insight prepared to leave Terran space, unaware that the galaxy had just crossed a line humanity never forgot, and would never forgive. It happened without drama. No signal followed. No warning preceded the response. Somewhere beyond perception, systems aligned and trajectories were calculated. The Accord remained unaware. The border remained quiet. The lie of safety still held for a moment longer, as something old and patient began to move. Far from council halls, humanity's space listened. Every silent sensor, every dormant array, every machine built for one purpose waited. The galaxy would not notice the change yet. But the rules had already shifted, and nothing inside Terran space would ever be untouched again. The first violation had been logged. The response had been authorized. The galaxy simply had not realized it yet. It would soon. Too soon for them. And far too late for everyone involved, especially those who crossed line without permission or mercy. Ever again. Terran Command did not wake an alarm. It activated with certainty. Systems that had waited for centuries came online without hesitation, because they had been built for this moment and no other. Humanity had learned long ago that treaties fail faster than vigilance. The records were clear. First contact had been costly. 3 colonies erased. Entire civilian populations lost while councils debated definitions and jurisdiction. Humanity had listened once. It had paid the price. After that, it withdrew, not in fear, but in refusal. No foreign law would ever again decide the fate of human lives. So there were no embassies, no appeals, no requests for protection. Humanity chose self-reliance because it was the only guarantee that mattered. When the distress trigger arrived, Terran Command did not ask why the Accord had failed. That question had already been answered centuries ago. Instead, a protocol older than most star nations executed across secure networks. Pursuit and retrieval, not a fleet, not a task force. One ship. The TSV Vindication powered up in silence. It was not designed to impress or intimidate. It was built to endure. Layered armor, redundant systems, drives tuned for relentless acceleration rather than elegance. Every design choice favored survival under fire and extraction under pressure. Its crew reported without ceremony. Volunteers, all of them. Each bound by the same oath, recited once and never repeated. No human left behind. No enemy leaves with one. No announcement followed. No signal crossed diplomatic channels. Terrans did not warn intruders. They removed them. As the Vindication departed its deep space berth, its trajectory cut straight and uncompromising toward the edge of Terran space. There were no evasive maneuvers, no attempt at concealment. The ship did not need permission to move through territory humanity already claimed with blood. Across the border, the Cathari Insight prepared for departure, cargo secured, logs falsified. They believed the silence meant success. They believed no one was coming. They were wrong. Terran sensors acquired the target before the Cathari cleared the outer markers. Signature confirmed. Vector locked. Civilian presence flagged as hostile extraction. The pursuit began without acceleration alarms or dramatic bursts of energy. Just steady thrust. Constant burn. Distance closing with mathematical certainty. No hails were sent. No demands issued. The Vindication did not chase. It converged, somewhere between stars. A countdown reached 0. A ship built for one purpose crossed from readiness into action. The retrieval window opened. The solution was already calculated. The Cathari would not know they were found until it was too late to matter. The galaxy still slept under its assumptions. Humanity did not, and it never would again. The decision had been made the instant the signal arrived. It would not be reconsidered. It would not be explained. For humanity, this was not escalation. It was enforcement, delayed only by distance, never by doubt. Alone, the rendezvous hub drifted at the edge of recognized space, a clutter of docking, arms, weapon platforms, and waiting ships. The Cathari Insight arrived on schedule, cargo intact, logs clean. The crew relaxed, confident the incident behind them was already fading into irrelevance. Negotiations were about to begin when the first alarm screamed. Sensors spiked across every spectrum. A mass translation event detonated inside detection range, violent and abrupt. Something exited faster than light travel, far too close. Its drive output burning hotter than any civilian or military profile on record. No hails followed. No identification. Signal. The TSV Vindication arrived like a thrown object, momentum unchecked, vector locked directly onto the Insight. Station defenses activated too late. Pirate escorts scrambled, 6 ships breaking formation in panic as targeting solutions failed to stabilize. The human vessel did not slow. Interceptor fire struck its hull and dispersed uselessly. Shields that should have absorbed or redirected the impact simply failed to respond. The Vindication absorbed the hits and kept coming, its mass carrying it forward with brutal inevitability. The first pirate ship attempted a flanking maneuver. A kinetic strike punched through its midsection before it completed the turn. No explosion. Just sudden silence as systems died and the ship drifted powerless. The second tried to disengage. The Vindication adjusted course by degrees, closed the gap, and rammed it aside with enough force to shear external plating. Another kinetic burst followed, precise, disabling engines without destroying the hull. The station watched as the remaining defenders broke. Some fired blindly, others fled. None slowed the human ship. It moved like a rescue craft under fire, not a warship seeking dominance. Every vector aimed toward the Insight. Every action served a single objective: close, disable, retrieve. The Cathari vessel attempted to raise shields. They collapsed under sustained kinetic impact. Architecture never designed to resist solid mass at that velocity. Boarding clamps fired from the Vindication and locked on with mechanical certainty. Within minutes, it was over. The Insight was dead in space. Pirate escorts scattered or drifting. No human ship remained engaged once resistance ended. The Vindication cut into the hull, breached cleanly, and extracted its civilians with practiced efficiency. No warnings were issued. No executions performed. Cathari crew were restrained and left alive. The human ship took only what it came for. Then it departed. No victory display. No signal to the station. No message to the pirates who survived. The Vindication disengaged and burned back toward Terran space without changing course. Reinforcements arrived to find wreckage, silence, and recordings that refused to make sense. 1 ship. 6 defenders. Seconds of engagement. Every sensor array captured the encounter. Every data core preserved it. The footage spread faster than official channels could suppress it. Across the region, analysts replayed the same moments again and again. The speed, the mass, the indifference to fire, the absolute focus on retrieval. This was not conquest. This was not deterrence. It was something far worse. The galaxy had believed humans irrelevant. Now it had proof of what happened when that belief was tested, and fear began to spread. Fast. UN CONDA INABLE. Irreversible. Because somewhere out there, the same ship was already gone. And no one knew how many more like it existed, or what would happen if the next line was crossed. Again. The footage reached the Accord in fragments. Incomplete sensor dumps, corrupted station logs, visual feeds that seemed exaggerated, almost theatrical. 1 ship entering close range and surviving concentrated fire. Multiple defenders disabled in moments. A retrieval operation executed under live combat conditions. At first, it was dismissed. Analysts flagged the data as manipulated. Pirate exaggeration. Faulty sensors. No single vessel could perform that way without support. The conclusion was comfortable, and therefore accepted. Then, the confirmations arrived, independent arrays. civilian relays, salvage drones. Every source showed the same thing from different angles. Timestamps aligned. Drive signatures matched. The human ship behaved the same in every recording. Silence, acceleration, impact, extraction. The footage spread faster than official review cycles could contain. Black channels carried it first, stripped of context and commentary. Then rogue analysts began posting breakdowns. Then entire feeds leaked into public networks. Panic followed, but not the kind the Accord understood. Humans had not seized territory. They had not issued demands. They had not pursued fleeing ships beyond mission parameters. Every action terminated the moment civilians were secured. That was the problem. The violence was not random. It was focused, controlled, relentless only, within a single objective. The ship did not fight for dominance. It fought to retrieve, and everything else was secondary. Accord leadership convened emergency sessions. Theories collapsed in real time. Records labeling humanity irrelevant were quietly amended, then erased. Military academies issued rapid revisions to doctrine modules that had dismissed Terran engineering as obsolete. Mass-driven hulls were no longer mocked. They were studied with urgency. Strategists attempted to model the engagement. They failed. Repeatedly. Human behavior did not align with threat matrices or deterrence theory. There was no escalation ladder to follow, no negotiation window to exploit. The Vindication had ignored optimal kill ratios. It had bypassed tactical advantage in favor of speed. It had exposed itself to unnecessary risk for civilians who held no strategic value under Accord logic. That made no sense. Until a new conclusion formed, one that unsettled everyone who reached it. Humanity did not calculate civilian lives as expendable variables. They treated each one as irreplaceable. Once that assumption entered analysis, everything changed. The engagement became inevitable rather than surprising. Any species that weighted life that heavily would accept costs, others would never consider. Rumors filled the gap where certainty vanished. Some claimed the ship was only one of thousands. Others insisted humanity had bred commanders incapable of fear. A few suggested the isolation had been deliberate, a long preparation behind sealed borders. No one could verify any of it. What the Accord knew, finally, was this: they had encountered a force that did not seek war, but would not avoid it. A species that did not negotiate over civilians. A doctrine built around values the galaxy had optimized out generations ago. For the first time in living memory, the Accord faced something it could not categorize. Not an enemy, not an ally. Variable. And variables were dangerous, especially when they moved without permission and acted without warning, and did not stop once they decided something mattered. The footage kept playing. The fear kept spreading, and the galaxy realized it no longer understood the rules it lived by. Terran Command did not decelerate after retrieval. It accelerated. The civilians taken from the Insight carried more than trauma. They carried data, navigation records, transaction markers, partial maps of routes that never appeared on Accord charts. Within hours, patterns emerged. Trafficking corridors, transfer points, ships that moved people instead of cargo. The conclusion was immediate and absolute. This had not been an isolated act. Others could still be held. Others could still be moving. Humanity escalated without announcement. No fleets assembled. No declarations issued. Instead, Terran vessels executed synchronized microjumps into hostile systems, arriving inside sensor envelopes where no sane commander would translate. Drives burned at tolerances other species classified as structural failure. Hulls absorbed stresses that simulations said should have torn them apart. Ships appeared inside transit lanes and vanished just as quickly. Kinetic strikes disabled engines mid-jump, leaving slaver vessels stranded between destinations. Boarding actions followed before distress calls could propagate. Targets were neutralized, crews restrained, and civilians extracted. To Accord observers, the operations looked suicidal. Terran ships exited FTL too close to gravity wells. They used momentum as a weapon. They accepted collision probabilities that exceeded acceptable loss models by orders of magnitude. Human crews did not hesitate. They did not pause to reassess risk. They did not abort when margins disappeared. If sensors suggested a human might be present somewhere within reach, the operation continued. Alien strategists watched in disbelief as hubs collapsed one after another. Criminal stations went dark. Transfer depots were disabled with surgical precision. Syndicate leaders vanished from networks overnight, taken alive or left adrift with no means of escape. The timeline made no sense. What should have taken years unfolded in days. Every strike followed the same pattern. Sudden arrival, overwhelming focus, immediate extraction. Departure before response forces could coordinate. It was not chaos. It was not rage. It was enforcement at speed. Accord doctrine relied on deterrence and negotiation. Human doctrine ignored both. There was no bargaining phase when civilians were involved. No escalation ladder to climb. Once identified, a target was resolved completely or not at all. Within a single cycle, dozens of trafficking operations ceased to exist. Species complicit in the networks began issuing emergency communications, not to Terran Command, but to the Accord, demanding protection, not from invasion, from accountability, that terrified the Accord more than any show of force. Humans did not claim territory. They did not seize infrastructure. They did not remain behind to govern or occupy. Every action ended the moment civilians were secure and perpetrators neutralized. There was nothing to negotiate, because nothing was being demanded. That was the paradox spreading through the galaxy. Humanity did not want war. It did not seek dominance. It did not care about reputation or fear. It cared about outcomes. If one human remained enslaved, the cost to free them was irrelevant. If 10 ships were required, 10 ships were sent. If risk approached certainty of loss, it was accepted. Other species optimized survival of fleets. Humans optimized survival of people. The distinction shattered every predictive model. Across neutral space, commanders recalculated borders and corridors. Criminal groups abandoned operations entirely. Some species began quietly purging records, erasing transactions, severing ties that might draw attention. It did not help. Terran operations continued with calm inevitability, no emotion, no celebration. Just motion, impact, resolution. The galaxy watched, unable to intervene, because this was not war. It was judgment, and no one was prepared for a species that delivered it without anger, without pause, and without permission, especially not one that did it simply because it could not accept any other outcome. The emergency summit convened without ceremony. No banners, no formal greetings. Delegates arrived carrying projections instead of speeches, footage instead of arguments. What had begun as a single border violation now pulsed through every sector as disruption. Trade lanes lay silent where criminal hubs once operated. Peripheral systems reported unexplained interdictions. Entire networks had vanished without declarations or claims. Humanity had not announced itself, yet its actions reshaped maps, faster than any treaty ever had. Fear settled unevenly. Some leaders argued the pattern was obvious. Humans were expanding influence under the guise of justice. Preemptive force dressed as morality. If allowed to continue, they would dictate behavior across the galaxy without ever joining its institutions. Others saw something worse, not expansion, but indifference to existing power. Humanity did not seek seats at councils or votes in chambers. It simply acted. That made it impossible to pressure, impossible to appease. Military representatives ran simulations. Everyone ended the same way. Direct conflict carried unacceptable uncertainty. Human ships accepted losses models others rejected. Their tactics ignored deterrence logic entirely. If civilians were involved, escalation was guaranteed. The chamber fractured, containment blocks formed quickly. Arguments hardened. Some demanded a united front before humanity became too entrenched to challenge. Others warned that attacking species that did not retreat from risk would end catastrophic ally. No one truly understood the motive behind Terran actions. They saw movement and assumed ambition. They saw efficiency and assumed planning toward dominance. They missed the consistency. Every Terran operation ended the moment civilians were secured. Behind closed doors, a smaller group reached a conclusion. That felt decisive. Humanity could not be reasoned with at a distance. Their ships ignored threats. Their silence denied diplomacy. But their behavior revealed something exploitable. They always responded. If a human was at risk, Terran assets appeared. If civilians were threatened, protocols activated immediately. That predictability could be used. The plan was framed carefully. Not an attack, an overture. A controlled engagement under diplomatic cover. A manufactured distress signal routed through neutral channels, claiming human civilians held by an independent faction willing to negotiate. The Vindication would respond. It always did. Once isolated, it could be surrounded, disabled, captured intact. With a Terran vessel in custody, humanity would be forced to talk. Forced to engage with the Accord on its terms. The risk was acknowledged. But the alternative, they argued, was surrendering authority to an unaccountable power. The decision passed quietly. No formal vote. No public record. Preparations began immediately. Signals were drafted. Fleets repositioned under the guise of routine patrols. Interdiction arrays aligned in deep space where traffic was sparse and witnesses fewer. Throughout it all, the Accord comforted itself with a familiar belief that all species ultimately responded to pressure, that even the most stubborn civilizations could be compelled once leverage was applied. They believed humanity would act like everyone else once cornered. They were wrong, not because humans were stronger than the galaxy imagined, but because they were not playing the same game. The trap was set with confidence born of tradition. Councils had resolved crises before. Power had always bent resistance eventually. This time, the Accord was not preparing to end a conflict. It was preparing to create one. And it had chosen the one trigger humanity could not ignore. Again, the distress signal was flawless. Human identifiers, civilian status codes. Coordinates placed carefully within a neutral sector, far from Terran borders and well inside Accord monitoring range. It claimed hostages. It promised delay. It offered negotiation. The Vindication responded immediately. It translated into real space, exactly where the planners expected. No deviation, no cautionary sweep. The ship appeared alone, drives cooling, sensors already reaching outward in search of lives that mattered. That was when the trap closed. Dozens of Accord warships decloaked in unison, forming a layered interdiction grid. Gravity anchors flared. Escape vectors collapsed. Weapons arrays powered, targeting the human vessel from every angle. For a moment, no one fired. A command signal cut through the silence. The Accord fleet commander broadcast clearly, formally. Surrender. Disarm. Submit to inspection. Resistance would result in destruction. This was framed as containment, not punishment. The Vindication did not reply with threats. It transmitted data. Packet after packet streamed across open channels. Logs recovered from trafficking hubs. Evidence of Accord enforcement units rerouting. Patrols. Internal communications showing crises manipulated. Investigations delayed. Slavers protected because they were useful. The message was simple and devastating. Humanity had not acted against the Accord. It had acted because the Accord had failed. The transmission ended. The Accord commander hesitated. The fleet held position. Doctrine demanded response, but the narrative was already cracking. Too many systems were listening. Too much proof had been released. Then someone fired. The first strike hit the Vindication's forward armor and dissipated without effect. The second followed. Then the grid opened fully, energy saturating the space around the human ship. That was when reality shifted. Space around the interdiction zone folded in on itself. Micro-distortions rippled outward, invisible until Terran vessels began to emerge. Not from one direction, but many. From shadows between sensor sweeps. From positions no fleet should have been able to occupy unnoticed. They arrived without announcement, without formation lights, without broadcast. They were already aligned that the Vindication was not the spear, that it was the signal. Terran ships moved. As a single organism, each covering angles the others left open, firing solutions overlapping in seamless coordination. Their weapons did not seek annihilation. They targeted engines, reactors, command nodes. Precision replaced spectacle. Accord warships lost propulsion almost simultaneously. Fire control systems went dark. Shields collapsed under focused kinetic impact they were never designed to counter. Attempts to regroup failed. Every maneuver exposed another vulnerability. The Terran vessels anticipated responses before they were issued, adjusting vectors with calm inevitability. This was not a battle as the Accord understood it. There were no heroic charges, no flanking gambits. Just methodical neutralization executed at speed. Within minutes, the interdiction grid was gone. Ships drifted powerless, crews alive, systems disabled. The Terran formation tightened, ensuring no secondary threat emerged. Then, it stopped. Weapons powered down. Drives held position. The human vessels did not advance further. They did not pursue retreating elements beyond the perimeter of the engagement zone. A final transmission crossed all channels. Humanity never isolated itself out of fear. It isolated itself because it had learned what happened when others were trusted with its civilians. The message carried no anger, no triumph, just clarity. The Accord had mistaken restraint for weakness, silence for absence, predictability for compliance. They now understood the truth too late. Humans did not prepare for war. They prepared for rescue. And when that purpose was threatened, every other rule ceased to matter. Across the galaxy, the footage spread in real time. Analysts watched doctrines collapse. Commanders replayed the engagement and found no path to victory. Humanity had not revealed a fleet, that it revealed a philosophy, one that did not break under pressure, one that did not negotiate over lives, one that would dismantle any system that stood between humans and their own. The Terran vessels withdrew as they had arrived, silent, controlled, leaving behind disabled fleets and a shattered assumption. The trap had worked perfectly. Just not the way the Accord intended. The galaxy would remember the moment it learned the difference between isolation and preparation. And why no species was ever meant to enter human space. Again, the Accord's fleets withdrew in silence. Engines burned at reduced capacity. Hulls scarred but intact. Humanity had left them alive on purpose, and that fact weighed heavier than destruction ever could. Survivors returned to their systems carrying more than damage reports. They carried understanding. Terran Command did not pursue. It did not press advantage. The engagement ended the moment civilians were no longer threatened. That decision echoed louder than any final strike. Then the message arrived. It was unencrypted, unfiltered, broadcast across every channel the Accord maintained, and several it did not. There was no flourish, no emblem, no signature beyond origin. Human space is sovereign. Human civilians are not bargaining. Ships. No species may enter Terran space. This is not a threat. It is a boundary. Nothing followed. No conditions. No demands. Galaxy finally understood what it had mistaken for absence. Humanity had not withdrawn because it feared conflict. It had withdrawn to remove temptation. Its borders were not defended by treaties, but by resolve. Terran technology was reinterpreted overnight. Not weapons platforms, but rescue systems hardened for combat. Ships built to reach the unreachable, survive the unacceptable, and leave once the job was done. Silence had not been weakness. It had been discipline. Those species exposed by the data faced consequences without spectacle. Terran tribunals operated with efficiency, not vengeance. Evidence was presented, judgments rendered. Civilians were returned home. The galaxy watched as accountability arrived without conquest. Other civilizations adjusted quietly. Diplomatic feelers were sent without urgency or entitlement. There were no demands for alliances, only cautious offers of recognition. Respect replaced entitlement. Fear shifted into something more stable. A new balance formed, not enforced by threat of annihilation, but by certainty of response. Humanity did not seek admiration. It did not claim moral authority. It simply demonstrated what it would and would not allow. The galaxy adapted, as it always did, but this time with care, yet far from council chambers. Beyond familiar trade lanes, sensors registered anomalies. Signals without pattern, probes that withdrew when detected. Something was watching both Accord and Terran space with equal interest. Terran systems logged the data and did not react. Preparation began quietly, because humanity understood something. The galaxy was still learning. Boundaries only matter when they are enforced. Silence only works when it is backed by action. No species enters human space. Now everyone knew why. And somewhere beyond the stars, something else was beginning to learn. Galaxy held its breath. Humanity did not. It waited. Ready.